দোকানে যাবেন, এই বইটার দাম 80 টাকা দিয়ে আমি কিনছি, বইটা কিনবেন, কিনে এই যে 2টা পাতা আছে শরীফ শরীফা, ছিঁড়বেন, ছিঁড়বেন, ছিঁড়ার পরে আপনারা হচ্ছে ওই বইটা আবার দিয়ে দিবেন, দিয়ে বলবেন এটা কম, অর্ধেক দামে বেচো, যাতে মানুষের অ্যাওয়ারনেস হয় যে এই বইয়ের আমাদের প্রতিবাদ এটা হতে পারে যে আমরা এই বইয়ের 2টা পাতা, এই শরীফ শরীফার পাতা ছিঁড়ে ওই বইটা আবার ওদের কাছে দিব, আমার টাকা দিয়ে আমি ছিঁড়বো।
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Asif Mahtab, who is joining us from Bangladesh to talk about a very important issue, which is the pushing of LGBT ideology into the Muslim world, and in particular in Bangladesh. Dr. Asif has a very interesting and important story, his personal experience and trials and tribulations dealing with a government program to push this ideology to Muslim society in Bangladesh. So thank you for joining me, Dr. Asif.
Right, just a small correction, Brother Daniel. I'm not a doctor, I'm a lecturer, so just Mr. is fine. It's okay. So, firstly, the story started, before I start the story, I just want to tell your audience that I am doing this at a great risk to myself. You know how this works for people like me. That first they try to character assassinate me. If that doesn't work, they send in the cops, and if that doesn't work, you know the rest. So, given that, I'll start where it happened. So, it came to our attention that there has been a story, a particular story that has transgenderism promoted in grade seven's book, which by my accounts is a terrible thing to do. I mean, it's controversial even in Western countries, and yet we see it in our books. Furthermore, when we investigated further, we saw that the organization, Bondhu Social Welfare Society, that was pushing for this story and which successfully did put it in the grade 7 textbook, also were pushing for a bill which they drafted and they gave it to the government. So the bill essentially criminalizes. So if your child were to say that firstly they're going to try to I would say, from my perspective, brainwash your child to become transgender. Once they achieve that from their textbook and their pushing of agendas and stories and cartoons, essentially, after all that, if you tell your parents that, okay, I want to be a transgender, I want to take drugs and hormones, and if your parents say, no, you cannot do that, they're going to imprison. The policy says they're going to imprison you for 1 year and give you 50,000 taka fine. Now, the issue is that policy, the government didn't know before me, has no idea that that's transgender because the word transgenderism doesn't have a Bangla translation. There is no conception in the Bengali people's mind, the policymaker's mind, anyone's mind of what transgenderism is. We know there is male, we know there is female. So how did they achieve their goal? They tried it in the guise of what we call intersex hijras. We have hijras in our country, which is intersex people with biological and chromosomal defects. And we try to advocate for their rights, special needs, healthcare, everything. And we pay for them. Everyone pays for them. So what they said is transgenderism and hijra. They're trying to mix it together and to say that hijra and transgenderism is the same thing. And they present it to the government like that. It worked because the government doesn't clearly understand what transgenderism. To their mind, well, intersex means transgender means hijra. They thought it was the same thing. Again, no one has any conception of what transgenderism is. My uncle is an educated person, and I couldn't explain for the life of me what transgenderism is. How can a man be a woman and a woman be a man? So nobody knows that in Bangladesh. So using that, they were pushing for this law. And I understood if I allowed this to happen, I'm going to be responsible for not protesting at this time. The entire Bangladesh would be destroyed. That's no hyperbole. We have seen how this affects the suicide rates where countries which promote that, we've seen their suicide rates. We have the data. We've seen how their depression rates are, and we see the countries which promote it has a higher depression rate, higher suicide rate. And when I see my students coming to me and telling me, sir, he's amazing students coming to me and saying, I'm actually a girl, but I'm a boy. So, and I can clearly see that they've been tangling with drugs and, testosterone and things like that. It's visually apparent. So that's when I had to, take a stand. I had to
So
protect my student.
these
Please.
textbooks, who is publishing them? So you said 7th grade.
Yes,
Are these textbooks? They're being taught within the public schools in Bangladesh.
they were.
They were. So how long were these? And it's within these textbooks in 7th grade that there is a story about a transgender individual. Sharifa, is that the name of the story?
Sharifa, yeah. So this basically describes the transition from Sharif to Sharifa, male to female.
So this was in the 7th grade textbook, and how long was it in circulation?
Around 2 years or so. I think it's around 2020 or 2019 where it was actually officially pushed in. There was some level of backlash, but again, they just changed the name transgender in the newer versions, and they just changed the name from transgender. They just changed the word transgender, kept the story the same. And it's not just the story. There are other elements of the entire textbook which Bondhu Social and other NGOs pushed into it that has so many issues.
Does it, so Bandhu Social, I just want to, because the audience might not be familiar with all of these moving parts. So Bandhu Social is an NGO. They are very influential, clearly, if they are dictating what the textbooks should be for the whole country, right? Over the past 2 years, they've been, or since 2020, you said, or 2019, they've been using a textbook that's been edited by an NGO or actually created by this NGO.
Well, from their versions that they advocated for the story. That's their version of events. They advocated for the story. They advocated for transgenderism. They're claiming that they're just an advocacy organization. And they are, if they were not powerful and if they did not have strong backing and power, they wouldn't be able to do what they did. And again, they were preying on the lack of understanding or linguistic limitations of Bangla to push that to our government.
So the government has to be in close ties and connection with them for them to implement their suggestions and put this textbook out. And the bill that you said was being introduced, the bill didn't pass though, right? It's very shocking for me because in the United States, there's no such law. I mean, they're trying to pass this kind of law in California and other more liberal states where if a child, like if the school decides that, okay, your child is actually transgender, then we are authorized to give that child, treatment, gender affirming treatment. And if the parent tries to block it, then they will, lose custody basically or face penalties. There are isolated cases where that actually happens, where a judge will rule against parents or against one parent if it's like a divorce case, but it's not the law across the country. And some states in the U.S. have actually banned it. They banned even the possibility that a school can declare that, okay, this child is transgender, therefore we're going to give them gender affirming care. But now in Bangladesh, like this was on the table. This was, in the in the process of being passed. It's just so shocking to me when you don't even have the concept of transgender as such. And that's the important distinction that you made, like the difference between transgender and intersex. Intersex meaning someone who's born with certain kinds of, maybe they're born with both male and female genitalia, these kinds of organ defects that naturally occur, or they have different chromosomes other than XXXY, male, female. So that's something that is known, even in Islamic law. It's known.
Of
It's something
course.
that those individuals exist. They have rights, and they shouldn't be mistreated because they've been born in a certain way. That's very different from transgenderism. That's very different than. So you don't even have the concept within Bangladesh. I mean, in the U.S., we didn't have the concept either until very recently. But then now this is what they're trying to push. So that's very shocking to me.
Well, again, like I said, since they don't have the concept, what they Ubuntu Social Welfare Society and other NGOs, what they try to do, and they did successfully, let's talk about Ubuntu Social first, is they try to prey on that weakness. So when you're giving to policymakers, when you're giving this paper or this document where you're saying, well, we're trying to protect the um, rights of transgender people. Now, in the minds of the policymaker, oh, okay, that seems nice. We want to protect our intersex community. We want to help them as much as possible. They have no conception of what actually is written there. In the bill, they have pangender, non-binary, all kinds of terms that, again, no one has any understanding of. So even if they Googled it, they could read the definition, but our people wouldn't know. Our policymakers wouldn't know what it is. They would assume that since it's written together, Hijra and transgenderism, they assume that it's the same thing. And that's what they did. However, I was in a state where this cannot be allowed. I need to take a firm stance against this kind of deception, this kind of intentional, malicious attempt to destroy the youth of our nation. And I did make a stand.
The same thing happened in Pakistan, because
Yes.
in Pakistan there was also a transgender bill introduced, and it's doing this kind of equivocation on the concept of intersex or hijra.
Mhm.
I think this is the strategy that they've used. So, and we should explain this to the audience as well, the way that NGOs work and who's funding NGOs. But in a lot of countries in the Middle East, in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and also Africa, they use this idea of, oh, we are just NGOs that are dedicated to reproductive health, HIV, AIDS. We're trying to teach, people how to basically avoid these diseases, the spread of these diseases. That's just the story that they give, but in reality, they're pushing this kind of liberal agenda, a feminist agenda, pro-LGBT agenda into these societies. But the excuse is, no, we're just trying to fight against HIV and the spread of these diseases and reproductive health, which no one has an objection to. No one really has an objection to that, but it's a Trojan horse for their actual purpose.
And also, it's important, and since we're talking about funding, this entire 850,000 US dollars was sent to them and other organization, and particularly them, by US aid. Santas, I believe, he was talking about why transgenderism money is being spent on Bangladesh on transgenderism.
Who
And
said? Sanders?
Santas, I think one of your Republican candidates, they kind of brought it up. It's in the news.
DeSantis.
I believe it was him who said he raised this issue. And again, that money went to you. The Bondu definitely went to Bondu Social Welfare Society. Now, here's my issue, brother Daniel. So Bangladesh is of geostrategic importance to both China for their Belt and Road Initiative and India, and also particularly America, because this Bangladesh, the Bay of Bengal, which is the largest beach in the world, and also it is the gateway to the South China Sea. So now you want to make investments in Bangladesh so that you can have the goodwill of the people, and you have the goodwill of the people. So far, Bangladeshi people were in support of America, but if you spend that much money to promote this kind of things that goes against the moral and even the legal framework of the country, I don't understand the geostrategic or diplomatic um, strategy of United States of America, what they were going for, because it seems like you're paying money to undermine your diplomatic relationship with the people of Bangladesh. That's where I can see, like, that's from my perspective. But if America is so strategically, have like so much intellect that they're seeing it beyond that, I don't understand, because the argument being made, I believe, in the United States, it's like, well, that's not a lot of money. It's a lot of money for Bangladesh. You could have like gave thousands of people a month's salary. I think 11,000 people a month's salary, minimum wage for a month's salary for Bangladesh. You could have done a lot of things with that money that could have contributed to us having a better relationship with the United States. But instead, from my perspective, you paid for staining your diplomatic relationship with Bangladesh. You, to my understanding, is paying to hamper your security, to your national security. Because imagine this: if some deranged Muslim Bangladeshi who's mentally disturbed is walking down the road, someone is saying, "Well, you do want to harm America because they're doing what?" They could say that, "Well, no, America is our friend. Why will we want to do anything for America? They helped us. They built us our mosques. They built us our universities." Or what is the argument that will be made? That, oh wait, they're trying to ruin your children. They're paying to ruin your children, your future. So I believe that also hampers American national security up to some extent, and it undermines your diplomatic relationship. So I don't understand why this is being used as a policy. I fail to understand. Again, maybe America, being a superpower, has better understanding of why it's doing what it's doing. But from my perspective, I think it's detrimental to their geostrategic interest and national security interests.
Well, what they're trying to do geostrategically is to undermine Islam and to undermine any type of devotion to Islam in Muslim countries. They're trying to secularize Muslim countries, and this has been the agenda from the beginning of colonialism. From the beginning of colonialism at the turn of the 18th and 19th centuries, they have wanted to secularize Muslims and liberalize Muslims. And more recently, even though this has always been the case, they've attacked gender. They've attacked, women's rights. They have said that, well, Muslims are harming women. Muslims, their culture, their beliefs actually harm women and deprive women of their rights. So we need to give women their rights by intervening through our colonial programs or even militarily. And now, more recently, in the past 20 years, they've added this component of we need to not only save the Muslim women, we also need to save the homosexuals, the Muslim homosexuals, the Muslim transgenders. They are being oppressed. They are being, their rights are being denied in these Muslim countries. We have to save them. That's the Trojan horse, the excuse that we want to help people secure better human rights. But in reality, the ultimate goal is to undermine Islamic morality, undermine Islamic gender roles, undermine Islamic communities, Muslim communities, and Muslim societies to make them more compliant with US interests and Israeli interests. So you'll see Zionists also play a big part in some of these foundations and NGOs in trying to push feminism and LGBT within Muslim societies. So that the geostrategy there is you're weakening ideological opposition to American influence and Zionist influence. The people who are most against U.S. Control or U.S. influence around the world and Zionist influence around the world are Muslims who are religious, as they call them, the Islamists. So to destroy Islamism, you have to destroy religious devotion. To destroy religious devotion, you have to destroy the underlying values, the underlying Islamic values. And you do that by promoting feminism. You do that by promoting LGBT.
Well, can I add something to that? So if that is the goal, here's what I would have to say to the American people is that, well, there are a lot of countries that are not Islamic in the region, in South Asian region, Central Asian region. There are a lot of countries that are not Islamic at all. They're very secular, but they're under the axis of Russia and China. You could de-Islamize Bangladesh as much as you want, but by the time you do it, we would be through this means by that time we would be part of Chinese influence or Russian influence, or more particularly more Chinese influence. So this whole strategy to de-Islamize and then make us somehow aligned to America is doesn't make sense from my perspective, because again, by the time you do it, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim or not. We can just align ourselves with China, who is, by the way, Chinese and the Russians. Russia is helping us build a nuclear power plant. Chinese are helping us build infrastructure. And US is is paying organizations that has been promoting transgenderism and, pushing stories into children's books. So as you can see, if from a strategic point of view, purely, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree with you that doesn't make sense, but I think it just doesn't make sense because economically there are other world powers now competing with the US. In the past, Russia and China were not able to infuse that much capital into these different countries, Muslim countries. And the US was the only game in town. So the US was going to countries and saying, yeah, we'll build you an airport, and we need to advise you on your textbooks. We need to advise you on what is being taught in the mosques. And this is what happened to the Gulf. We see in these Gulf countries with the UAE or Saudi, to a lesser extent Qatar, Jordan definitely, but they the control of their textbooks, and this is something that they have in their textbooks as well. You have Israeli firms that are editing the textbooks for children in these Gulf countries, in Jordan, and they're edited so as to promote liberalism, secularism, feminism, and LGBT. But it comes with a lot of economic benefit. Now I think the tide is shifting. Now the scale is shifting more in favor of other economic powers. Some of these countries like Saudi are saying, well, do we really want to adopt all, like, this is a pretty big price to pay. We have to adopt this liberal ideology for economic infusion, but Russia or China is offering the same economic infusion without that liberal baggage. Then we would prefer to align with Russia and China. So the US actually is now caught, like, their strategy has worked in the past, but now it's not going to be as effective because economically there are other players. So they'll probably shift. But I agree with you 100%. It's no longer the effective strategy that once was, maybe even 10
Well,
years ago.
I would again like to advise the people of America again. My uncle married, like, my aunt is a white American who married my uncle and came to Bangladesh and married him and converted to Islam. So again, so my future niece and nephews would be American. So if that's the case, like, if you really want to have a want us Bangladesh to be aligned with the American access, you need to adapt to the changing situation. Again, I would like to highlight Russians are helping us build a nuclear power plant for clean energy. Chinese are building infrastructure. You're spending money that has been used to promote LGBT. You see, it doesn't really make very much sense, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean, it doesn't make much sense. But the American people have nothing to do with the government. Like, it's the Biden administration couldn't care less what Americans actually think. Americans actually are overall opposed to this idea of transgenderism for children, and like a 6-year-old or a 7th grader, for example, determining that he is actually a different gender. The American people are completely opposed, and they're also completely opposed with the idea of sending millions of dollars to these Muslim countries for the sake of gender programs. This is not like there's popular support for these types of programs. So it's really irrelevant what the American people think. They're opposed to all of this, but the government, the Biden administration in particular, and other administrations, I think Trump also, like the liberalization in the Gulf was under Trump. Trump is a Republican, and on paper he's supposed to be opposed to LGBT or transgenderism, etc. But in terms of foreign policy, they were pushing that. They were pushing that on Muslim countries in a different region. So it's a huge disconnect between what the American population wants or thinks and what the American government actually does. Even the American politicians might not even have control. It might be outside lobbies or organizations that are controlling the U.S. government itself. So this is the reality, unfortunately, of American politics. But what about one other angle that I think is very interesting is, how does India play into this? Because if India is able to influence the Bangladeshi government to align more with secularism and to adopt some of these LGBT values, doesn't that help India geostrategically to bring Bangladesh into its control of influence, or to better ally with Bangladesh as opposed to Bangladesh being with other Muslim countries?
well, that particular story about transgenderism is more of a American funded program, but India has its own program where they're putting they printed the textbook. They have the various kind of liberal and in one particular instance, they have a picture of one of a goddess in the book. I think it was a religious book, religion book, or something along those lines. They have a picture of a goddess and things like that. That's what they're going for in our textbooks, so that we are more warmer towards India and that culture. They're pushing their culture into Bangladesh, making it seem like our culture, like we have always opposed historically North Indian aggression into our regions, but they're trying to make it seem like, and at a varying degree successfully, to seem like we are discount Indians. We are not discount Indians. We have shared heritage, but that doesn't make us the same. We have our own culture and our own tradition. Yes, we were a Vedic people for sure at once upon a time. I mean, Bangladesh, as you know, was one of the richest, most prosperous region on the planet, per capita, the richest country in the world. It is the most fertile land on planet Earth. And okay, so let me introduce Bangladesh to your audience. You will know about Bangladesh. You know when Alexander crossed the Indus and attacked King Porus, and he defeated King Porus, and he wanted to move forward. His army mutinied. And one of the reasons his army mutinied is because when they heard that Bengali people were preparing with 6,000 elephants and I believe 80,000 horses, which is an exaggeration, but it was because of the fear of Bengali people and their armies that Alexander's army mutinied historically. So we are an ancient people. We have our own roots and tradition and culture. And after we converted to Islam from Vedic religion, we had our own rich culture, history, and everything. We although have shared roots with India, but we are not India. We historically was sort of never part of an India. We were part of British India, but that's British India. So there is that. So again, India wants its sphere of influence, but I think China is more strongly pushing the money and on the influence in Bengal, and again, America has been trying to have its influence in the region for its ports. But again, I feel like America needs to do better politically and strategically to have that influence that they want, because it is a very important strategic location if you want to check Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. And your current policy, from my humble perspective, is inadequate.
So tell us more about the reaction within the country. How did the religious class or the scholars, the ulama, how did they react? Did you find a lot of support from them? I'm sure you found a lot of support, but was there any dissenters or anyone who sided with the NGOs?
Okay, so I have to first explain the protest that I did, which is in itself
Sure.
controversial and which kind of was used as a tool to make sure that I don't have a job in the university anymore. So I went to a podium, and this has been talked about a lot. People were talking about this. We were sending documents to the government, but no one really took us seriously. The ulama were also talking about it, and because they pushed against it, the various political groups and ulamas, they changed the story remained the same. They just changed the word transgender to hijra. That's all they did. The entire story was the same. And then they published it again. So I knew I had to do something because my students were having their lives ruined. I care about my students. I care about all my students, including those who have been disliked, those lives have been potentially ruined by this rather backward, barbaric, and atavistic idea from the time of Prophet Lut or Sodom and Gomorrah. These kind of ideas. So what I did was I went to a teachers meeting who discusses about the curriculum issue from organized by a political party, but I went there anyways. And then I said, look, we can't do this. I'm asking the people of Bangladesh to take the book, tear the 2 pages, tear it, and then give it to your children or give it to the shopkeepers, right? And then they can give it to the children, but tear the 2 pages. I asked the people of Bangladesh to do that. And after I did that, that video became viral, that I'm actually taking an action. I'm making a stand. That video became viral. And within, once that became viral, in the same night, 12 p.m. at night, 12 a.m. at night, my university called me and said, hey, you didn't sign the contract. Even though I was taking classes, I worked for them with under verbal and electronic contract. They said, you didn't sign the contract, so our Samia Miss asked you to not come to class anymore. Further discussion will be done by her after in a certain date. So I was asked to not come to class, and I verified it, and that was an authentic thing. And I asked my coordinator and other people about it, and yeah, I was essentially asked to not come to class anymore. So I was essentially taken off the board. So I was not allowed to take university classes anymore. When I posted about that, and in the when I was giving my speech about tearing the book, I said, look, no other faculty on Bangladesh is talking about it, even though they know. The reason they're not talking about it is because they will get fired. They will get fired if they talk about it. And once that became reality, like within the 24 hours after the video became viral, once that truth became reality, the people of Bangladesh had a wake up call. Like, what is happening? And then everyone's like, okay, we're going to tear the book, the 2 pages of the book. Everyone from village to town to city, everyone, all classes of life, all political association with massive support, people were like, we tore the book, like tore those 2 pages. Like, we will not have this in our children's book. So that was the protest that I led. And the outcome was the court of Bangladesh, the Supreme Court, I believe, asked that, no more. The books that are there, just take it back. They created a 5-member board to review the story and review the content. So that was one success. Second success is another minister said, we will not pass any bill that hampers or promotes something that is illegal in the country, and hurt the religious sentiment of the people, because that's not what we are about. That is another. So the bill is not going to be passed. So again, the investment United States made for its geopolitical interest is really wasted, in my opinion. They still have a lot of money there, but it's wasted. So you got nothing out for that money. Yeah.
So what do you think is their game plan? So they're obviously not going to just stop, their agenda because of this one setback that they've experienced. So how do you think that these NGOs are going to proceed? What is there any indication or any thoughts that you have on that? Because if plan A failed, then they go to plan B.
Of course, they will have their plan A's and B's, but before that, you have to understand the reality of Bangladesh. We are at a dollar shortage in our country. We have a dollar deficit. So now the issue is, since there's a dollar deficit and wherever the money comes from, it's something that we have to accept. Because if the dollar stops, we have to import a lot of things, including medicine and such. What are we going to do about that? So because of that, there is a limitation of what we are capable of doing against these organizations, which up to a large extent are malicious and also promoting things that, according to our own laws, are criminal. So plan A failed, but the problem with their plan A was there was a huge problem. First of all, organizations like Bongo Social wrote reports. Again, they deleted it, but we have the video screen recording of it and downloaded paper, which I already sent it to you, where they said they were promoting it. They said they were advocating for it. They essentially admitted to everything they did. Also, the organization I was working for, Braq University, they made cartoons for children, which again, we have screen recording of it from their website, James P. Grant School of Public Health. As you mentioned, the public health is used to push this kind of agenda. They have that. They have cartoons for children promoting, making it seem normal, this kind of behavior.
আমি শুনেছি অনেক সময় ছেলেরা নাকি ছেলেদের প্রতি আবার মেয়েরা নাকি মেয়েদের প্রতি আকর্ষণ অনুভব করে। এটা কি কোনো রোগ?
একদমই না, এটা খুবই স্বাভাবিক। একজন ছেলে বা মেয়ে যেমন বিপরীত লিঙ্গের প্রতি যৌন আকর্ষণ বোধ করে, তেমনি একজন ছেলে ছেলের প্রতি বা একজন মেয়ে মেয়ের প্রতি যৌন আকর্ষণ বোধ করতেই পারে। এটি কোনো রোগ নয়। প্রত্যেক মানুষের অধিকার আছে কাউকে ভালোবাসার এবং নিজের পছন্দের মানুষের সাথে থাকার। কে কাকে ভালোবাসবে বা কার সাথে থাকবে তা তার একান্ত নিজস্ব ব্যাপার। এ নিয়ে সমালোচনা করা উচিত না।
Once we have discovered it, and once there was a backlash for firing me, well, technically they didn't say they fired me. They said they didn't hire me anymore. Once that happened, and their official explanation was, we do not think teachers who tear public and destroy public property is behaving in a teacher-like manner, which is interesting because the court, on the basis of my protest, took out the book. The minister said that they will not make any, that draft law will not come to fruition. So if the court and the legislative branch is making statements in support of my protest, then how does that really, how is that not teacher-like attitude? When every single person in Bangladesh right now knows and support me, except a small 0.0001% minority. So there is that. So Braq University was making cartoons and other things and pushing for this agenda. I have volumes of documents where they themselves said it. So that was that's a problem for them, because they shouldn't have published papers and journals and posted them on their own website and other places where they were describing exactly what they were doing. So plan A is heavy. So plan B is, of course, they're going to go underground. So far they have been openly doing this under our noses. I didn't know about it properly until all of these got exposed. Now they're going to go underground and do the same thing. Their university, they're teaching, the things that they're teaching is kind of these kind of ideology that you're talking about. So that's how they're trying to create a future generation from there. Braq is is the largest organization, I believe, on earth. NGO on earth, I believe. So they're going to go underground. They're going to continue to push this kind of agenda from their universities. They're going to teach them. They're going to essentially brainwash them. So because, as you know, that a student will prioritize their CGPA. If they know that if they say things that like things like what the teacher wants to hear, then they will get better marks. And once they keep lying to themselves long enough, they will become that, and they do become that. If you talk to, I've worked in other universities, by the way, which has no problem with me whatsoever. I recently joined Braq. So Braq University, like the students of Braq University, has a unique thing they often write in the paper: diversity, inclusivity, and equality. It seems like it's almost as if they're brainwashed to it, and you know what those words mean. And if Braq was so diverse and inclusive, how did they exclude people like me? How is that inclusive? It's inclusive until you add Muslims to it, or my version of Islam is not acceptable. You're excluding my version of Islam. Only your secular, liberal version of Islam is allowed. Is that inclusive? Is that diverse? I don't think so.
Yeah, so DEI is the bane of the existence of many institutions and corporations in the West, but this is associated with the Biden administration, but it's coming from this overall ideology of liberalism, feminism, secularism. But it's good news that the public in Bangladesh reacted in this way. They reacted in a strong way, saying that this is not who we are, this is not our values. But it's interesting that that kind of reaction comes from LGBT. But if it's some other issue like feminism or even secularism and the acceptability of goddess worship, for example, you mentioned the example of textbooks including that, there's less of a reaction because this is not something new. Like introducing this kind of ideology into society through the NGOs, that's not something new. That's been happening for decades, and some places it's happened even longer. But the point is that the reaction, and even I know about this when it comes to my work, Like when I have videos on many topics and I say that, look, we have a religious institution in the US that is pushing feminism, there's not much of a reaction. But if I say, oh, they're pushing LGBT, then suddenly they wake up and they say this is unacceptable, and people take a harder stance. The average Muslim takes a harder stance in America if you point to that issue. But feminism is even arguably much more damaging to the structure of society, to gender roles, to values. Feminism is actually the bigger issue, and it's more pervasive than transgenderism, for example, even though they're related. But why do you think there is something specific about this issue that you have like it goes viral and everyone reacts?
I think for Bangladeshis, as you said, there's always a line. But for Bangladeshis in particular, like people didn't know. People don't have a conception. Like if they, like as I told you before, like I couldn't explain to my uncle for the life of me what transgenderism means. He's like, okay, well, just like open his pants, you'll know if he's a guy or a girl. What are you talking about? So that's why it's something that's so foreign, so like it's impossible to even comprehend. So so that's one of the reasons why there was an outrage, because again, once I've been, taken off the board, taken off my classes, that's when people are curious, like what happened there? And we have also reached out to ulamas explaining the situation. And initially the ulamas were very resistant to the idea. It's like, they were like, no, this isn't a problem. Like this can't be real. But once I was, like discontinued from the Braq University after I spoke and protested against it, that's when everyone just woke up like, hey, this is real. There is a thing called transgenderism. And this guy is saying that his students are coming to him and telling him that the girls are telling him that they're guys. They're telling him that, well, he's not, sometimes they're guys, sometimes they're girls. And these are happening in the highest echelons of our academic or society, which are the universities. So, and I made the argument in my speech that once this happens, once you let go, in the highest echelons, and you ignore the highest echelons, the rest follows. The battle for Bangladesh is right now happening, and he who controls the zeitgeist will control the future. And this is something that I'm terrified of, and I'm asking the Muslim ummah around the world, I'm requesting you guys to support us in Bangladeshis and speak about Braq University and Bondhu Social, who's been advocating for these things. Because Palestinians are suffering tremendously, but if a Palestinian dies, he will attain paradise. His soul is not damned. But if you control the zeitgeist of Bangladesh, which is the third largest Muslim country in terms of population in the world, and the most fertile land in the world, what happens? These people, when they grow up, they're going to create more children, promote more transgenderism until our population collapse. Our people are depressed and suicidal, and more importantly, their souls are going to be damned, which is much worse than any of the other situations. So, as much as I have personally protested and did rallies for Palestine, I have personally collected money for Palestine and sent it to them. My students did, I did, leading that as well. But again, the battle for zeitgeist in Bangladesh is equally important, because if you let these organizations win, Bangladesh will fall. Bangladesh will fall in the future. We cannot allow that to happen. The deceivers are not outside. The enemy is not at the gates. The enemy is within. And it's something I'd like to point out, a bit of a history, just for people to understand. The highest amount of Israeli aircraft shot down was by a Bangladeshi man. His name is Saiful Azam. He shot down 4 superior Israeli aircraft with an inferior aircraft himself. He's a real life maverick, Saiful Azam. So if you let Bangladesh fall into dystopia, into ruin, again, for putting transgenderism into children's book, the Muslim Ummah will fall. If first Bangladesh, later the rest will fall later. I'm urging the Muslim Ummah around the world to make a stand. To at least, if you can't protest, then at least speak about these institutions and these bad ideas that are being promoted in Bangladesh. We cannot lose Bangladesh.
Yeah, and I think everyone is concerned about Bangladesh as part of the Ummah, and we have to all be united in opposing this kind of colonial project, cultural colonialism, neo-colonialism, trying to secularize the Muslim world. It's something that affects everyone. And, just like the hadith of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if the ummah is like one body. If one part of the body is hurting, then the whole body hurts. So, yeah, I mean, people need to understand that it's not just 2 pages in a textbook on transgenderism that's going to cause the downfall of Bangladesh or the Ummah. It's the underlying ideology that it represents. And that's the cultural colonialism. This is the neoliberal project to secularize the Muslim world. This is what has been attacking us for over 200 years now, and we have to continue to fight against it. So, yeah, I really appreciate your experience and the stand that you took, risking your job, risking your life to take a stand. It's really important. I hope that you inspire more Muslims in Bangladesh and also outside of Bangladesh to be brave and say, no, this is the line. We're tired of compromising our religion to accept these kind of foreign ideas or these ideas that are outside of our culture, outside of our civilization, outside our religion. It's very important, very critical. So Jazakallah khair, brother, for your efforts. Anything else that you want to convey? Any like specific projects that you have in continuing this fight that we can support?
Uh, well, again, as I was saying, like Braq University has courses, documentaries that they have courses that teach quote unquote gender diversity. They teach gender diversity. They're putting cartoons into cartoons for children that promotes this kind of LGBT. I have all these documents here and screen recordings. Like they use terms like sexually diverse individuals, gender diversity, sexual diverse individuals. Sometimes they're more open and they have documents and where they say that we had a meeting with gays, lesbians, and transgenders, boys of Bangladesh, men who have sex with men. These kind of terminology is being used by Braq University and Bondhu Social Welfare Association. So I would request the people of the Muslim Ummah to please, because our people don't understand these things. We have no conception of what sexual diversity is for the most part. So if the Muslim Ummah starts speaking about it, the people of Bangladesh will soon understand that if they feel there's an international support, they will soon understand. They will have to be real. They will realize that there is something malicious and malignant going on. So again, I'm asking and urging Muslim Ummah to start talking about it, to look at the documents, to look at all these things that are out there, and to at least support Bangladesh, both on
Yeah.
the streets and especially social media.
Right. One of the arguments that some of these liberals will make, not just in Bangladesh, but even in Pakistan, in India, in Malaysia, Indonesia, they'll say that, well, Islam has a history of toleration for intersex, for hijras. So that is gender diversity. We have this history of tolerance, but then after colonialism, suddenly Muslims adopted the colonial homophobia or the colonial transphobia. But in reality, by reviving tolerance for transgender and for LGBT, we're actually reviving the original state of Islam prior to colonialism. And Daniel's perspective and Asif's perspective, that is the colonial perspective that is transphobic and homophobic. So do you have thoughts on that?
Of course, we have research on it that the Mughal Empire were supporting intersex people and people hijras essentially, which if you go to any village, any town, any city in Bangladesh and ask what a hijra means, they're going to say hijra is intersex people. And before the British came and destroyed our civilization, Mongols had intersex people in highest echelons of power. We have no problem with intersex people. There was no transgenderism. There was intersex, and we supported in the past. Mughal Empire supported it. We supported in the past. We support it now. Hijras. But what you're trying to do, if you look at the website, they're defining hijras as transgenderism. Who in Bangladesh defines Hijra as transgender? Nobody. Literally nobody. So that's the thing. So if you're making that argument, yeah, well, we historically Islam was tolerant, of course, and that's what you're preying on. Islam is tolerant. We are tolerant to all kinds of people, but what you're trying to do is create an idea that a non-existent idea that doesn't make any sense, that is, like, I would argue, backwards. And again, it's nonsensical. Like, we have no conception of the idea of how does a tiger, and some people are saying it's natural. Did you ever meet a tiger, like, who identifies as a female tiger?
Yeah, but
No.
the argument that they'll make is that, well, there was gender diversity because, as you said yourself, they had intersex hijras who were in these positions within the Mughal Empire. I don't know which positions those were, but they had positions. So this is exactly the gender diversity that we're talking about. So why do you have a problem with it?
Well, I don't have a problem with intersex being aligned with us. That's not, as you yourself said, Brother Daniel, that they have intersex. We have laws since the time of the Prophet Muhammad on how to deal with intersex people and how to respect them and have them with us in our prayers and our funerals. So that's no problem. But that's not the gender diversity you're talking about. You're defining. If you look at Braq University's various documents, they said they're meeting with people who are transgender, not intersex, transgender, gays, lesbians, etc. Which all of these things, according to our legal system, is criminal. What? So you're sitting with a lot of them would be criminals. So how are you adding diversity if you're so is it diversity if you put a criminal in together with you, like, so you have a rapist and
I
you
mean,
put
they
them.
would say that. I mean, they'll say that, well, these laws are based on colonialism. This is based on the homophobia of colonialism. I think the answer is simple. Like, homosexuality was never considered something acceptable within the legal system of Muslim societies. It was
Or
never
any
something
society.
where, or any society, right? This is something that did not just come about because of British colonialism or French colonialism. This predates colonialism.
Of course.
There was no tolerance for this type of behavior within Muslim societies. And just because, well, they'll point to, like, oh, well, hijras existed, or you have homosexual behavior that existed. Yeah, it existed, but it was stigmatized. It was something that was considered to be wrong. It was something that was considered to be contrary to the ethics and the values of Muslim society, far predating colonialism. So it's actually this attitude of acceptance and equality of all of these, quote unquote, genders and all of these sexual orientations. That's something that's colonial. That's something that's newly invented and is being pushed on Muslims
Great.
in order to control them and destroy Islamic identity. This is what is the neo-imperialism
Okay.
that is so destructive.
Great. So to that, I would say that if you think so, good for you, stay in your country and think like that. As long as we have autonomy over our country and our culture and our civilization, we can decide what we want to. You don't get to decide that for us. I think that would be the pinnacle and epitome of colonialism. And you also mentioned the support of the ulama. After this happened, every single ulama from every single school of thought. Never in history of Bangladesh I've ever seen. They always usually have difference of opinion and they're clashing with one another, which is preyed upon by various left-wing organizations to keep the ulamas engaged with each other than to unite. But in this circumstance, every single ulama from every single school of thought were like, we support Asif Mahtab. We are going to be there for him. At any cost, at any circumstances, we are backing him up on this. So this is something that also happened. That's also unprecedented in the history of Bangladesh. So yeah.
MashaAllah, that's great. Well, it was great speaking to you. You shared a lot of good information with us. We're going to include some of these screenshots, inshallah, and links so that people can go and see the material that you wanted them to see with the evidence. But yeah, it's a very shocking situation. But I'm glad that you are fighting for the right cause and Muslims are backing you up. Alhamdulillah, that's great news.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Daniel, and thank you for having me. And out again, finally, just I'd like to say that do not ignore this situation in Bangladesh. This isn't over by a long shot. This is the books are still under review, and if the Muslim Ummah around the world and even Bangladeshis around the world don't speak up about this, post on social media, and also practice activism in the road, they will not change. They're going to still say that Asif Mahtab is wrong about the definition of transgenderism. Transgenderism is Isra, and keep the same stories. So I would humbly ask the Muslim Ummah of the world to speak up and raise your voice against this predicament in our
Yeah,
country at the
yeah.
moment.
You have to. I guarantee you that the same kind of story and the same kind of material is in textbooks in all of these Muslim countries, because all of these Muslim countries have these same NGOs. They're backed by USA. They're backed by Soros. They're backed by all of the same money. This is a global project. So I guarantee you, it's just that in other countries, maybe they haven't noticed it in the same way that you have pointed out. So
I
everyone needs
think
to be aware of this.
I forgot to mention. Yeah, Braq University is the early recipient of Soros's $1 billion. So that's something that we should also consider. You know who Soros is. We all know who Soros is. We know what he funds. And Braq University has OSUN, Open Society University Network, which is part of Soros's Open Society. And you know, we can go to their website and you know what that is about. So since we're running out of time, we can have that discussion another time. But thank you for having
Yeah,
me
I
in
mean,
in your show.
yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. And hopefully, we'll follow the situation very closely, and we are making dua for the best outcome, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.